you may not have enjoyed the international break, but I tell you what, Arne Slot certainly did. He's come back looking so tanned he could be an extra off Towie. But to be fair, it's good that the manager has a chance to refresh himself because he knew exactly what he was going to be facing today. Plenty of questions about Alexander Isak, and we got to hear exactly how ready the new man from Sweden actually is. I expect to see him in the squad against Burnley, maybe not playing the full game. There is going to be a slow ramping up of his work. We heard about the man who got away on deadline day as well, Marc Guehi, and whether or not Liverpool may or may not be going back in for him. Spoiler alert, I think they will. We also heard a lot about Burnley. For a change, we actually heard about the way Liverpool have faced the promoted teams last season and how hard it's going to be this time around. But there's plenty more where that came from, and we're going to go through it all back in the lab. Here we are back in the lab, and while I'm here, let me quickly just say, go Pack Go. It was short and sweet from Arne Slot today, which didn't actually suit everybody. There are a few people who are upset they didn't get a chance to ask their question. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but press conferences have been handled a little bit differently. There's been a change of personnel at Liverpool FC. It was Tony Barrett who was handling these, but now it's Jack Walker who's in chair directing traffic. And some people at the back of the room, unfortunately, didn't catch his eye and you can get a chance to ask their questions. Now, this is one of the reasons I'm always up front and at the whim of Arne Slot taking the piss out of me when I'm wearing shorts or something. But, you know, I don't mind. I get a chance to ask my question and you will hear exactly what I asked him later in this show. First things first, though, let's go through the injury news. It was good and bad news. Bad news was some people who weren't aware that Curtis Jones picked up an injury against Arsenal and he will be ruled out of this game against Burnley on Sunday. I wouldn't be surprised if that also ruled him out of England contention because I was quite surprised he didn't make the squad for these two games this week. But if he'd been injured, then that would certainly explain it. Now, Slot didn't mention Jeremy Frimpong, who obviously was out and we were told he would be out until around about this time. But he did say that there were no issues with anyone else. And the fact that he didn't specifically mention Frimpong tells me that he probably is back in training. The first training back was today, giving them a day off after the returning from international duty. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not Jeremy Frimpong makes it into the squad. But considering some of the injury issues for some of the other teams, either before the international break or during the international break, Liverpool's almost clean bill of health is definitely a big boost. But without any further ado, let's get right into it, the top takeaways. Top takeaway number one, Liverpool definitely needed Isak. Despite talking about how happy he was with his options after players came off the bench to score the winner in the first two Premier League fixtures, Arne Slot did admit that once Alexander Isak was in the building, he was pleased. One of the reasons he was very pleased was because Liverpool did need more options. I think when you look at the squad from last season, there's been three forwards who aren't here any longer for differing reasons. And then you've got to factor in Salah going away to AFCON. So even though Slot did say, yes, he was happy with his options and he spoke about Frimpong being a forward option and Ngamoa coming in and Chiesa being more fit, I think most people would have been quite nervous in terms of Liverpool's attacking options. If Isak didn't come in, there was only one injury away from it being a real issue, which is interesting because it compares, or should I say it contrasts with the wider football discourse of the Liverpool didn't really need Isak. Why do you need Isak? You've already got Ekitike. Why do you need another striker? What does this mean for Ekitike? Etc, etc, etc. Now, Slot wasn't asked any questions specifically about the Ekitike-Isak axis in this press conference, but that's been a lot of the conversation, as I say, in the wider football world, right? Liverpool needed Guehi more than they needed Isak. No. Liverpool needed Alexander Isak. Aside from the fact that Liverpool are hoping to play upwards of 55 to 60 games this season across all four competitions, the fact remains that Liverpool's great strength has been being able to change things from the bench. As I mentioned, they've already scored 2 goals from the bench, but if you think back to last season, those were the key moments that really helped Liverpool. When a team felt like they'd already hemmed us in, or maybe that they'd done the bulk of the work in frustrating Liverpool and stopping them scoring, what happens? You bring forwards off the bench and they look at them and they're like, oh, what, these guys? I mean, the classic example of this, I think, is Brentford away. Chiesa came off the bench, Elliott came off the bench, Nunes came off the bench, and what happened? They scored 2 goals, won Liverpool the game, and that really felt like the turning point in the Premier League season. So, attacking depth, having 6 options across the forward line who can come on and really create havoc, I think is really, really important to this Liverpool side. And look, Arne Slot agrees. Top takeaway number 2, the Guehi story is not over. Now, Slot doesn't like to talk about players who aren't his, although this was a very special case because Marc Guehi very much was a Liverpool player right up until the point where he wasn't. We've all seen his goodbye video. We've all heard the rumours that Guehi was sitting in Liverpool's London offices wearing Liverpool training gear, ready to sign on the dotted line. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. He ended up staying at Crystal Palace. The interesting thing about all of this was Slot was very happy to talk about the qualities of the player. So again, something he doesn't normally do. And then he had a line where he said, let's see what happens in the future, which if you can imagine someone speaking with a wink rather than actually winking, then that's what he did. Because that really kind of says to me and to most of us that Liverpool still believe Marc Guehi will join the club at some point in the future. The interesting part is that we've heard lots about other clubs coming into the picture, Real Madrid, Barcelona, PSG. Essentially, this is an England international who will very likely be starting most of the games of the World Cup for England. So by that point, he'll be a very highly sought after free agent. However, it feels like Liverpool are still confident that they will get their man despite all of those things. I think what we also can see is that Liverpool aren't going to be trying to go back in for him in January. I think that the money that would cost, even if it's not a lot of money, it's still money that they could save by just waiting a few months. I think it would take something very drastic, even beyond an injury crisis, to see Liverpool go back into the market for him. Even if, for example, there were injuries to Konate, to Van Dijk, and maybe even to Gomez. We've seen this in the past where Liverpool have had 3 centre-halves out injured and they do only have 4. I think it would take something drastic. For example, maybe Liverpool know that Konate is not going to sign his new deal. Maybe one of the teams interested in him come in with a large enough offer to tempt Liverpool to the table. I think that might be the only scenario where you see Liverpool go in for Guehi in January. And to be honest, if they're confident that he will deny all other advances and still come to Liverpool, that kind of makes sense. I know that lots of people are nervous about Liverpool's defensive stocks, particularly when you consider the injury history of Konate and of Gomez. And you consider, well, Konate's head may well be turned, as a lot of people seem to believe. You've got to understand, last season, Liverpool's 4th choice centre-back was Jarell Quansah, and he played a grand total of 16 matches as the centre-back, not including his appearances at right-back. I think it amounted to just over 1,000 minutes across the whole season. Now, Liverpool just spent £26 million on Giovanni Leone, and they believe that he's going to be fantastic, and they're going to believe he is the future. They also believe that he will comfortably be able to handle the workload of 1,000 minutes as the 4th choice centre-back. Now, obviously last season, Joe Gomez did get injured, so it's not as if to say, oh, that's not accounting for injuries. It is accounting for injuries. I think it goes back to what I said last week. You cannot plan for every single potential scenario. You can't build a squad that fits with everybody. We've already seen that Liverpool have had to leave out a first teamer like Federico Chiesa from the Champions League squad. Squads are finite. You can only have so many players. So it makes sense that Liverpool believe they'll be able to get through this season with what they have. I do think it means that Joe Gomez is going to be playing more football over the course of the season, which, as a Joe Gomez apologist, I'm not mad at that at all. Top takeaway number 3. Slot is not expecting an easy ride against Burnley, although I suspect he'd quite like one. He has a lot of respect for the promoted teams. He mentioned the fact that last season, most of the games, if not all of the games against the promoted sides were tight, particularly the 3 away games. He said that they'd only won games very late on. It was all very tight. And I've heard him reference many times before, particularly the Leicester against a home game, the fact that there were a few moments when it was late at 2-1 that could have gone either way. And It's something that he has returned to again and again over the course of the season, despite the fact, and we have to acknowledge this, Liverpool did win 6 out of 6 against the promoted sides last season. So it was like they gave them trouble, but Liverpool was still able to overcome it. But this idea of winning games tough, winning games late, winning games hard, it's something that he's returned to again and again. And you've mentioned on a couple of occasions the fact that only Manchester City in their pomp are able to roll teams over 3 and 4-0 and win comfortably. He's spoken in terms of the league is now strong and no one's going to do this. It goes back to what he said last week about how there won't be a high points total to win the league. But you do also get the impression that he would quite like that. Even though he says no one is able to do that at the moment, I think he would actually quite like to be able to do that at the moment, particularly when you consider Liverpool are going to be competing on 4 fronts, when you consider the way that Liverpool went out of the Champions League last season and lost the League Cup final in that period where it felt like they were running out of gas. The best way to conserve some energy is to win some games easily. And we may well see Liverpool trying to do that against Burnley, even if Arne Slot's certainly not going to tell that to Scott Parker and his players beforehand, give them any extra motivation. It's time to hear Arne's answer to my question, which is about Liverpool scoring lots of goals without creating lots of high-value chances.
Arne, you've scored more goals than any other team in the league this season without creating a massive amount of high-value chances. If you look at the expected goals average, I think it's just over 1 a game. Against a team like Burnley, who appear to be really happy to concede possession, how do you make sure that your time on the ball is as efficient as it can be?
Yeah. To implement as best as possible the way we want to play, but in the end, the final third is mainly for we do certain patterns, that's also clear, but it's also a form of the day of our wingers mainly, because you end up, because of their playing style, mostly on the side. So the better they are, the bigger threat they are, the more chances we will generate. And then it's 9 out of 10 times also about the score, because if you can score an early goal, that normally helps you in a game like that. And if you don't, or even worse, you concede a goal in the beginning, that gives even more energy to the other team. So there are so many factors going into a game like that. But as always, we are hoping that our attackers can make the difference, and that's what they have to do every single game, attackingly, but not only attackingly, because if we lose the ball and we're really good in our counter pressing, that can generate chances as well. So yeah, that is for me the biggest lesson of our game against Arsenal there, where in the first half we weren't front-footed enough in terms of our pressing, and in the second half we were. I think Arsenal were front-footed in the first half in terms of their pressing. We were that the second half, and as a result of that, I think we deserved to score the goal in the second half, because we already scored one which was fractionally offside, and we were getting closer and closer. And in the end, I think we even deserved to score that goal based on the second half, not based on the first half.
My motivation for this question was the fact that it's a strange quirk in as much as Liverpool scored more goals than anyone else, as I mentioned, but their XG is really low. They've had 2 games with an expected goals less than 1 goal against Newcastle and against Arsenal. Now, Newcastle and Arsenal are 2 teams in the Champions League, so they're good sides, so that will account for some of that. But if you think back to last season, the one thing Liverpool got really good at was scoring what looked like easy goals. Goals where the ball was played across the 6-yard box and someone slid in at the back post, or there was a ball crossed in and someone was nodding one in at the back post. Goals with high value expected goals. Now, I know a lot of you don't like expected goals, but essentially what that tells you is that where you are from that position on the pitch when you strike it, you're more likely to score than not score, or depending upon the value, how many times out of 10 you're likely to score. Now, of Liverpool's 8 goals this season, only 2 of them have been above 0.2 expected goals, which means that 1 in 5 times in that same scenario, you're expected to score. Szoboszlai's goal, I think, was 0.03. Gravenberch's goal against Newcastle was 0.02. So Liverpool are scoring from very unlikely positions, which you do wonder whether or not that's sustainable, which is my motivation for asking the question. Now, Slot's answer I thought was really fascinating, because what he essentially said was that Liverpool's final third play is largely dominated by the form of their wingers. When they are playing well, they are the ones who are generating the chances. And I mean, if we look at last season, we can see it's true. Mo Salah, most goals in the Premier League, most assists in the Premier League. The second highest scorer in the team was Cody Gakpo, played on the underside. Then you had Luis Diaz, who, although he played some games centrally, most of his goal output came when he was playing on the left wing. And I mean, you've got an argument to say, well, hey, it was working last season, it worked really well, why mess with it? Gakpo's still around, Salah's still around, you'd expect Liverpool to still play the same. However, that does not account for the fact that Liverpool spent nearly £250 million on two players who play in the centre, in Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak. So it was still kind of surprising to me that Slot was still saying that it's the wingers who are going to be dictating the way we want to play, because essentially you'd assume that with those two superstars in the middle, there would be some evolution towards maybe using central areas as a way of creating more chances, and maybe it's going to be less onus on those balls to the back post. We'll have to wait and see how that develops across the season. But yeah, as I say, it was something that very much pricked my ears up when he mentioned it. I was like, oh, okay. We'll see how that goes. And that's a lot for this week's show. Thanks as ever for joining me. I will be at Turf Moor on Sunday, so keep an eye out on my Substack page for my match report as it comes out. There will be another episode of The Late Challenge on Monday. If you didn't see last week's show, go back and listen. We were talking about Michael Owen and had some very interesting things to say about the interesting things that he had to say. It's out there over on YouTube. We would ask you to come and get involved with our live show that's happening, but all the tickets are sold out. So if you missed out, I'm sorry, it's too late. However, there is another chance for you. We will be recording the show. So if you become a Patreon member, you will get a chance to watch the show. And trust me, it's definitely worth your time to go and do that. So go and find The Late Challenge on YouTube. Click to subscribe. Come on to Patreon, become a member, and join in all of the madness that me and Robert get up to. Now, I'm still doing stuff with the Anfield Wrap, of course. I recorded the Friday show with them yesterday. One of my favourite shows to do, because we get to talk about the whole Premier League. There's going to be another edition of the Robert Mo Show coming up on Tuesday as well, so keep an eye out for that. And there will be another This Is Anfield column in the works coming very soon. So, still plenty more of Mo for your enjoyment to come over the next few weeks and months. See you then. There we go. That's the one.